Welcome to the woods. It's a late night one, so it's welcome to the cabin. I'm going to start by telling you a story from way back in the mists of time, or when I was younger. When I was 5, I remember watching a war film on telly. I used to love war films. And in this film, they had a zip wire, and I think it went from like a mountain down to like the boats or whatever. But I remember watching it and looking at this zip line and these soldiers zooming down this wire and thinking to myself, man, that looks fantastic. And I reckon I could make one of those in the garden. It's in our back garden when I was 5. We had an old-fashioned washing line, which we had a pole at the back of the house and another pole at the bottom of the garden. It was a long garden, it was about 100 foot, and between these poles we had a wire, and it used to dip in the middle, and my mum used to use a prop. And for you young'uns who have only ever seen a rotary line, a prop is like a length of wood, it had a V cut in it, and that would go in the line and prop it up, and you could hang all your washing along it. And I figured if I tied a rope to the washing line and jumped off the coal bunker, which was like a 5 foot little building out the back where the coal used to go, I could slide all the way down the garden like a zip wire. I also figured that if I tried this and it didn't work right, like the washing line didn't hold my weight, or I slipped off of the rope, I'd come crashing to the ground and end up in a crumpled heap, and it was probably going to hurt. But I had a backup plan. You see, I was lucky enough to have, well, when I say lucky, it was lucky for me and not so lucky for him. I had a younger brother. So I was 5 and my younger brother was 4. And I could pretty much talk him into trying anything, which is why he ended up in casualty quite a lot. On this day, I put the buckets up against the coal bunker, and me and my younger brother climbed up on top of it, and that was about 5 foot high. Now when you're 5 or 4 like he was, 5 foot's quite a height. And I got a skipping rope and I tied it in a knot round the washing line, and with the other end of it I tied it around my brother, and I pushed him off, and it worked. And I was a bit amazed and a bit jealous to watch him zooming halfway down the garden on this homemade zip wire. And when I say halfway, that was because that was the lowest point of the washing line. And that's as far as he got. So he hit halfway, stopped. Now the rope I'd tied around him, I hadn't tied underneath his arms. I just tied it around him. Well, that shot up to around his neck. So I'm 5 years old, stood on a coal bunker, watching my 4-year-old brother, who's now hanging by his neck halfway down the garden off the washing line. And I'm thinking 2 things. I'm thinking, he's in trouble, and I'm going to be in even more trouble in a minute. Now, unbeknown to me, as per usual, my mum had been watching us 2 terrors out the kitchen window, and she'd seen me push him off the coal bunker, and she'd watched him zoom halfway down the garden. And when she saw the rope slide up from his arms and to around his neck, she'd shot out the house and was running down the garden as fast as any mother would, I should think. My brother, in the meantime, had had the presence of mind to grab hold of the only thing he could, which was the skipping rope above his head. Now this helped. So there he was, hanging and gripping onto the rope for dear life. And the moral of that story? Well, there's many. I think the lesson learnt from my brother was probably not trust everything I asked him to do, although it continued for a fair few years. But when he was hanging around by his neck, he did have the presence of mind to grab hold of opportunity, being the rope above him. And as we move on through life, that's kind of what we've got to do. We've got to hang around, and we've got to grab opportunity when it arises. And when I say hang around, there's two parts to that. You've got to hang around insofar as you can't just walk away from things when they're tough. You've got to stick it out. And the second part is, it really matters who you're hanging around with. You see, something was taught to me a long time ago, and it was to do with business. But it applies just as well to your private and personal life. And what I was taught was that no matter what business you wanted to go into, it matters who you hang around with. So if you wanted to become a bank robber, for whatever reason, the best people for you to hang around with would be successful bank robbers. And over a period of time, you'd pick up all the tricks of their trade. You'd start to become like the people you were hanging around. And you'd learn how not to get caught. And you'd learn the banks to rob. And sooner or later, the opportunity would arise for you to do what you'd chosen to do. Now, you may not want to be a bank robber. You may have wanted to be an electrician. In which case, the best people to hang around with would be electricians. And you'd start to see what they had in their toolkit and how they wired things up and how they operated their business and how they were successful at that. If you wanted to be an electrician, it would be a bit pointless hanging around with plumbers. Because if you did that, what you'd end up learning was plumbing. And people tend to do what they're good at. People enjoy doing what they're good at. If you're really good at bowling, and you've got an opportunity to choose between going bowling or playing tennis that you're shit at, which one do you think you pick? The one you're good at. So you might think you want to be an electrician, but if you're hanging around with plumbers and you learn all about plumbing and you get quite good at it, guess what you're going to end up being? What you're good at. So it's important in life, not just business, that you hang around with the type of people you'd like to be. And that's important, because all too often in life we surround ourselves with people that aren't like the people we'd like to be, but we've known them a long time, and you know, they might moan a lot and might always be in trouble, and that might not be what you want to be. But guess what happens? Eventually you end up being like the people you hang around with. So when you've decided what sort of person you want to be, or what direction you want to take, look for the people that have done it and hang around with them. Learn from them. They are where you want to be. So you've got to hang around. And if you hang around with the right people long enough, the opportunity will arise for you to do what you want to do. And it really doesn't matter if this is business or personal life. If you identified a problem, look for the people that offer solutions, not just the people that moan about it. Nobody likes just hearing moaning. We all understand there's problems. You look for the people that say, yes, there's a problem, but here's the solution. They're the people you want to be around. So that you too can be part of the solution to the problems that you see. So you see that little story about my brother hanging around and grabbing the rope above his head is pretty much what we've all got to do. Hang around, stick it out, make sure you're hanging around with the right people, not someone who's going to push you off a coal bunker, obviously. And grab the opportunity to do what you want to do when it comes along. Because more times than not, that opportunity will present itself. You've just got to be in the right place. Anyway, I'll speak to you later, people. Have a good one.